Hi everyone, this is Brett, and this morning I'm going to go over HTML images. As I was going through the tutorial, I found that this image tag doesn't actually work, and we talked a little bit about in our live class why that is, but I thought I would spend some time going through exactly what's happening. So to get started, I'm going to open up Atom, and I'm actually just going to copy and paste what is found in the tutorial here. You should already have this in your text editor, but we just have our doc type, we have our HTML, we have our head, we have our body, and then we have this information here. So I'm going to save that to a folder on my desktop called DevNano, and I'll call this sample.html. Then, like we've done before, I'm going to open the file in Chrome so I can read it. And you can see there's my file. So this is heading, this is a paragraph. So now what the tutorial says is to come in and take this code here, this image source. I'm going to add that in. So this is the image tag. It's saying the source to locate the image is w3schools.jpg. It has this alt tag, which stands for alternative text, which means that if the image can't load, some browsers will use this to display text instead. And then I have a width parameter, which tells me the width of the image, and then a height parameter to tell me the height. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to load it back into Chrome, and you'll see that the image doesn't actually load. So using the developer tools, I can right-click and hit Inspect. Let's see if I can make that bigger. And you'll see here on this file, it's located at w3schools.jpg, and if I hover over it, it's going to show me the actual full path to the file that it's looking for. So you can see there it says file://users Brett desktop devnano w3schools.jpg. Now if I go to that file path on my hard drive, that w3schools.jpg doesn't exist. So what does that actually mean? Well, I'm going to open up Finder here, and I have loaded into my Finder. You can see down here on the bottom, it may be a little bit small, but on my Macintosh hard drive, there's a users folder, and then there's a folder called Brett, and then there's a folder called Desktop, and there's a folder called DevNano. And inside of that path, or that location, there's no file called w3schools.jpg. So if I was to come to the web, well, I'll come to this page and I'll say it says try it yourself. And here's their picture. And if I was to right click and save that image, and if I go to my desktop, which is a shortcut to users Brett desktop, and I'll go into the DevNano folder and save that, you'll see that I have w3schools.jpg here now. So in the file path, users Brett desktop devnano, that file will exist. So if I refresh the page, now it's there. So when we talk about file paths, we're talking about a location on the hard drive. So I'm going to go into a terminal window and show you the same concept. So on your hard drive, this is the root of the drive. And if I list out all the folders, you can see that there's a number of different folders here. Now I'll start going into users, like I talked about here. So I can change my directory into users. Then I can change my directory into a folder called Brett. Then I can change the directory into a desktop. And I can change it into DevNano. And if I do this pwd for my present working directory, you can see that the file path I'm in is users Brett desktop devnano. And if I list out the files, I see the same thing here with the sample HTML and the w3schools.jpg. Now the same concept exists in Windows. They use backslashes instead of forward slashes, and they use C drive or drive names instead of just a root path. But the basic principle is still the same. So now let's change and start playing with some stuff to really understand how this works. And to do this, I'm going to jump over to the HTML. I believe there's a thing called file paths, HTML file paths. And this talks about the different types of file paths in the tutorial here. So image source picture.jpg. This is for when the picture is located in as the same folder as the current page, which in our case, the picture here, W3 Schools, is located in the same folder as sample.html. Now there's a second way of doing this, is if you want to organize your files a little bit different, and let's say we created a new folder called images, and we took that picture and we moved it into the images folder. So now my file path to get to the images is no longer users Brett desktop dev nano, but I have to go into another directory called images, and if I list the files, you'll see w3schools.jpg, and if I do present working directory to see the file path, I'm in users Brett desktop dev nano images. And on the Mac, you can see basically the same thing here, that the file path, it does it in a little bit different format using pictures, but the principle is still the same. Users Brett desktop dev nano images. So if I reload the page, my image breaks, because if I highlight over this, it's still looking in the file path users Brett desktop dev nano W3 Schools. So what do I need to do? Well, I need to change the path to match the path to where the actual images folder are. So I do this, what's called relative path, that the image location is relative to the location of my sample.html. So as they're showing here, you don't need to type in the full image path because it knows the path of where sample.html is. And so we just use that. So starting from here, or relative to this position in the hierarchy of the file path hierarchy, where is the images folder, or the images file? So here I can type in images /w3schools.jpg. And now if I refresh that, that works, because relative to my HTML file, this is where to go find the W3 Schools file. So hopefully that part makes sense. Now, there's this root relative, which we talked a little bit about in class. I'm not going to cover this now because this is more for if you're on a web server. And when we do web servers, we'll talk about that. But for now, you can just keep your files in the same folder as your HTML, or you can put it in a subfolder and reference it like this. Now the final way of doing this is called absolute file paths. And if we were to come back to this file path and we were to right click on it and hit copy image address, that's going to give us the full HTTP address of where that file is. So that's saying on the internet, www.w3schools.com/html/jpg. That's the internet path to the file. So it's in the same format where you see the /, and this represents, the server that it's on in the HTML folder, and then there's the picture. So to show you an example, if I was to paste that URL into my browser, I'm going to see this picture. Likewise, if I paste it in, I say, go look for that picture at that location, at that path, and I refresh, well, I'm going to get the same image. But in the image source, you'll see that the path to the image is using an internet path and not a path on my local file system. So I hope that helps with understanding image paths. Please post any questions that you have in the notes or on the Slack channel, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks.